3. Ptolemy Caesar, Tribunus Laticlavius of the 5th Legion of the Romano-Egyptian Dominion, stood at the top of the sweeping beach and surveyed the scene before him. This was how my father must have felt when he first set foot on the shores of Britain, he thought. A new land to tame, a chance to shape destiny. For a moment, his mind turned to the great man he had never really known, and he felt that familiar burning thread of both pride and loss pulse within him once again. I will be worthy of your name, father, I will, but allow me a little time to make my mark. Remember, you did not have to follow in the footsteps of such a legend. After all, I am not yet 24. The landing north of the mouths of the Indus had been made without opposition, and the veterans of the Battle of Rhodes and the Siege of Tarentum were able to disembark their landing craft without even wetting their boots. Out to sea, the expedition's larger ships, mostly converted merchantmen with rigging still bristling about their funnels, kept their cannons trained suspiciously inland. Scurrying between them and the shore were the shallow draft landers, modified light galleys, carrying 2 centuries of troops, with their kit, on each journey. Men assembled by ranks on the beach, sunlight glinting off the bayonets of their long rifles. Soon the muddy sand was churned and rutted by feet and hooves and the long scars of gun carriage tracks. Ptolemy turned his gaze inland towards the shallow, fertile valley of the great river. The area was more lush than the reports he had seen had led him to expect, especially in trees. That was good. Timber was required not only for constructing the legion's base camp, but also for the hungry boilers of their ships. Back in Rome, Marcus Antonius had already directed the seeding of lands where forests might be expected to grow. Fire not only helped them form the new weapons of the Dominion, it propelled the fleet that carried them. Fire was power, and must not fail for want of fuel. Ptolemy followed the roadway up from the beach that had been cut through the low scrub towards the site chosen for the encampment. It was on raised ground, above the level of any likely flooding, and its perimeters had already been staked out. As he watched, work was starting on the first of the defensive ditches. This was the Roman way. If possible, always build a secure camp before advancing to battle. Within hours, a tented encampment holding 10,000 men would have grown on this spot. Within days, the first permanent structures would be started by the legion's auxiliaries. The conquest of India had begun. On the second evening after the landing, as the staff commanders filed out of the legate's tent having delivered their reports, he called on Ptolemy to wait behind. Aulus Severus Glabrio, senatorial legate commanding the 5th Legion, was small and wiry, just past 40, with grey-shot hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He contemplated the lean young man with the strong nose and high forehead who stood before him with, it seemed, an uneasy interest. Then he gestured to a small folding stool, one of the few amenities the Spartan shelter possessed. "Sit down, Tribune," he said. Ptolemy sat, alert and respectful. There was a moment's awkward silence. Then Glabrio blurted out, as though in disgust, "By Hades, I hardly know how to address you properly." "Tribune would seem sufficient, sir," remarked Ptolemy. "Then tell me, Tribune," continued Glabrio with some feeling, "just what it is you are doing here." "Fulfilling my position as your second-in-command, sir, to the best of my ability." Glabrio waved a dismissive hand. Yes, you've done all that has been required of you, even though you must have realized I've had as little to do with you as possible. Well, on board ship there is slight opportunity for private conversation, and anyway, he smiled ruefully, I'm no sailor. The best thing that can be said for those infernal new engines is that they reduce the time at sea. Ptolemy commented, straight-faced. If the truth be known, I'm no lover of the sea either. For a moment the men stared solemnly at each other, then joined in mutual laughter. Glabrio got up and moved to a small chest in the corner, from which he produced a finely wrought decanter and 2 goblets. He served Ptolemy with wine, and resumed his own seat. Now, said Glabrio more easily, I will ask again. What is Ptolemy Caesar doing here as only second in command of a legion, and without special retinue, when he could have had supreme command of any force he chose for the asking? That is 2 questions, replied Ptolemy. I will explain why I wish to be here in a while. But as to my status, that is simple. You know what experience I have of war, sir. Do you think I am ready for such a command? Ah, I see now, I think. No, you need a few more years yet before you're ready. Glabrio's face darkened. You need to feel the twisting of your guts before the battle, but learn not to show it. To smell the fear of your troops, and know how to rally their spirits. How to choose wisely, both in strategy and men, and stand by that choice. He looked squarely at Ptolemy. Those are a few instances, but words do not do them justice. You have to be there to learn such things. Just so, smiled Ptolemy. Well, may the gods grant you good fortune. It's the hard road, but the only one for the way you're going. Rome, that is. The Dominion needs strong men to rule it, now the Civil War is past. If you've half the quality your father had, then you'll last the course. Thank you, sir. You could give me no better praise or encouragement than that. Glabrio chuckled. You'll pardon the thought now, Ptolemy Caesar, but I half feared you would be like those young equestrian pups they've given me for tribunes. There should be limits to what money and influence can buy. He hesitated. But perhaps some of them are your friends? Acquaintances at best. You would not have thought well of me if I had used my influence to bring mere friends along, however well I thought of them. But to be fair, I think Patinus and Agricola have the makings of sound men. Perhaps we shall see. But now we are getting off the track. You said there was a second part in answer to my question. Why do you wish to be here, of all places? Because the Dominion is ready to extend its frontiers. And also, because here there is an intriguing mystery to be unravelled. Tell me, what do you know of the history of this land in recent years? Well, only the rumours, of course. Something happened here during the wars of the Triumvirs. A great famine that wiped the land clean, perhaps. Those who survived made their way into Persia or across to southern Arabia, bringing strange stories with them. There was also talk of an earthquake that closed the passes through the mountains of the north. I know there has been no silk or jade from the east for many years, so something must have occurred to interfere with the trade. But if it was famine, then I see no sign of it here. The country certainly seems fertile enough. I suppose it may have recovered over the years, though. I only hope the stories about a plague are not true. My soldiers will face anything they can see to fight. But an invisible sickness? He looked grave. I wondered about that, with Alexander's port not far along the coast, seemingly deserted, and yet being ordered not to occupy it. There is no plague, Ptolemy said firmly. From all the reports I have read, and I have made a special study of such things, no plague caused this land to empty. But there are strange traces in Alexander's port that I wanted undisturbed until I could examine them personally. He smiled. You see, I have been using my influence to arrange matters, but not to satisfy mere personal curiosity, you can be sure. Sooner or later we would have come here. When we do, in greater numbers, I wish us to be prepared. If there is anything strange about this land, any possible danger to the Dominion, then it must be identified. But, as you said, there have been rumours. In some places, tales of what happened here have led to panic. That must not be allowed to spread, which is why the details of this mission have not been made public. Glabrio was nodding. Yes, that makes sense. We are the scouts, and there is always some danger in that. Very well. What are your orders? No orders. You are in command of this legion, Severus Glabrio, by virtue of hard-won experience which, as yet, I cannot equal. I rely on you to continue to fill that post to the best of your ability for the glory of Rome and the Dominion. There was passion and indomitable authority in his words that demanded attention and respect. Yes, thought Glabrio, your father does live on in you, and no less your mother. But, Ptolemy continued more evenly, I do have a request. You only have to name it. When the camp is secure, I wish to visit Alexandra's port to find what I may. And then I will take a cohort up the Indus on landing craft to explore as far as possible into the interior. Then, well, that depends. Take the first cohort, twice the number of men and the best centurions. Remember what your father wrote about their worth? Well, you'll have Marius Ruffinus as the most senior, and he would have approved of him most thoroughly. Thank you, sir. Glabrio rose. We will discuss the details further tomorrow. He smiled. Meanwhile, I think we should take our rest early. Clearly there is much to be done. Ptolemy saluted and was turning to go when Glabrio said, I met your father once, you know, when I was young. Bright interest lit up Ptolemy's face. Truly, sir, I would be most grateful to hear anything of my father. We shall talk of him and many other things, I hope, when the business of the Dominion allows. But I will say this. In Tribune Ptolemy Caesar, I think he would recognize a worthy son. 6 landing craft steamed in line astern up the broad, slow river, trailing wakes of churned water behind them from their new screw propellers. The air was heavy and the sun hot. Little moved on the banks, save an occasional wading bird. Beyond the reeds and occasional drooping palm along the water's edge, they could see thickets of bamboo and breaks of mature trees, which sometimes merged into more substantial groves. Ptolemy stood at the prow of the lead ship that carried the 1st century. Beside him, mounted in blocks, the legion pennant fluttered on the end of its staff, together with the wolf insignia of the cohort, and the spear bearing the old maniple rallying standard of the open palm. There came the slap of flesh against flesh. Tribune Lucius Salvius Agricola wiped the remains of another mosquito from his neck, and observed, with mild reproach, This new land of yours may be lacking in larger game and human inhabitants, but I can testify there is no shortage of stinging insects from personal experience. Does it ever get any cooler here? Up in the mountains, I believe it can be pleasantly temperate. Oh, and how far away are they? About 10 days at best. But I expect we shall be making several stops on the way as we come across any settlements, so I'd better be off and find some more ointment for these cursed bites, because there will be more to follow shortly. Agricola concluded resignedly, slapping at another insect. I shall return from this trip looking positively pockmarked, I know it. And I shall say so to my parents. There, that is what comes of trying to make a man of me. I was quite happy as I was, and now look. A face no decent woman will share the same house with. He started off in search of medicine. I have a theory that the people here simply left to escape these wretched insects. Ptolemy watched him leave with a smile. Agricola's complaints and apparent delicacy were quite superficial, he had discovered. Fundamentally, he was a cheerful companion whose manner concealed a stubborn streak of determination that would sustain him beyond the point where others might yield. At least, that was his judgment. Time would tell if it was a true one. First Centurion Rufinus approached. "All awnings rigged as ordered, sir," he reported. Rufinus was a burly, grizzled man with a prominent scar across his right cheek. His whole being suggested a steady imperturbability of character. He had keen, sharp eyes that missed nothing, as many a common soldier could testify. "Well done. I want no one suffering from too much sun at this stage. Let the men build up a tolerance gradually, and make sure they wash down in river water as often as they need, but for Jupiter's sake, don't let it be mixed with our drinking water. We'll replenish that from somewhere faster flowing." "Understood, sir." "How is the fuel supply holding out?" "Should last us through tomorrow, sir." "That is good. But should we see some suitable trees at any time through the day, we will make a landing and cut some fresh firewood." Ptolemy regarded the centurion thoughtfully. "What do you make of this country, Rufinus?" Rufinus scratched his chin with a rasping sound and surveyed the slowly moving scenery. "Well, sir, that would depend on what it would be for. I've seen a few spots already that would make a nice bit of farmland, though I could do with it being a touch cooler. Now, for fighting over, this is not so good. Too much cover. And I like to have firm ground under my feet if I have to move quickly. Still," he patted the heavy revolver in its holster, slung opposite his gladius, "I reckon we have the edge on anything we're likely to come across. Thanks be to the gods for sending the oracle." He paused, then lowered his voice almost reverently. "Your pardon for asking, sir, but the oracle, is it as wonderful to behold as they say?" Ptolemy smiled. "Rufinus, it is undoubtedly the most remarkable thing I have ever seen." At noon the next day, they came across a deserted village on the river bank. A line of posts running out into the water suggested that a simple landing stage had once existed, but had rotted and washed away over the years. Most of the buildings still standing were of simple stick and thatch construction, but a few of the larger structures in the centre of the village were more substantial, with walls made out of local mud brick. While details were sent to cut fresh wood, Ptolemy took Agricola to examine the buildings more closely. When he returned to the ships, his face was grave, and Agricola was so subdued he did not complain about the mosquitoes again until sundown. The expedition continued on up the river. Ptolemy was shocked into wakefulness by the first horrified cry of alarm ringing out in the darkness. Throwing off his blanket, he scrambled to his feet, pistol in hand. The ships had been moored that night in the centre of the river in box formation, 2 astern and 3 abreast, linked by lines to stop them from drifting. Now, from the strip of water between the 2 rows, there came a furious thrashing and plunging and wash of spray, rising over the cries of the sentries. "Jupiter save us! What is it?" exclaimed Agricola, struggling out of his own covers to stand by his side. There sounded the crack of a rifle shot. "I don't know. Follow me." They sprinted down the long deck, dodging the milling groups of freshly roused soldiers who were grabbing at their own rifles and lining the rails. There came the flashes and reports of more shots as they reached the stern. In the black waters, indistinct forms writhed and twisted. Waves slapped the side of the lander, making it bob and sway. "All ships, light your lanterns," ordered Ptolemy. "See what you're shooting at." One by one, the big ship's lanterns that hung over stern and prow were kindled from the small hand lamps. Torches of pitch-soaked reeds were lit and held aloft. Yellow light blossomed over the churning waters, blotting the stars from the sky. The soldiers stared aghast at what it revealed, tangled in a mooring line. At first, Ptolemy thought there were several monstrous creatures, all madly twisting about together. Rearing high over the confusion, snapping at the sudden ring of lights that surrounded them, were two huge snake-like heads whipping to and fro on long, black, sinuous necks. Below them, he caught a glimpse of a massive, scaled and ridged back, resembling a crocodile's, whilst a long tail like that of a smooth lizard beat down with a smack on the water. Then the crocodile body twisted on its side, revealing a pale underbelly and powerful clawed and webbed legs that tore at the rope which cut into its flesh. There were 3 pairs of legs on its body. Suddenly, Ptolemy realized what he was seeing. It was just one creature, a chimera with 2 snake heads, a grotesquely extended crocodile body, and 1 long snake tail. "Hercules' bane! A hydra!" exclaimed Agricola, his voice cracking in fear. Even as he spoke, the line entangling the creature snapped, and the thing surged towards them, its twin heads rising high over the ship's rail. Slotted eyes gleamed madly. Forked tongues flicked in their gaping mouths, which bore not just the fangs of snakes, but also rows of cruel spiked teeth. A soldier discharged his rifle full into one head, then screamed in pain and fear as its twin whipped forward and closed its jaws over his shoulder, lifting him, kicking convulsively clear of the deck. The air filled with acrid gun smoke, lit by orange spikes of flame, as the company poured shot after shot into the creature. Strips of flesh were torn from its neck, splattering dark blood over the seething waters. Other bullets ricocheted off the heavy scales of its body. The creature plunged about wildly, trying to find an escape from the circle of pain and confusion, its prize still struggling feebly in one set of huge jaws, while from the other came a fierce hissing like the venting of steam from a piston. Then Ptolemy found Rufinus by his side, grenade in his hand, the fuse of which was spluttering down almost to the casing. With fine judgment, Rufinus tossed the device at the enraged animal so that it exploded as it struck. There was a sharp concussion and a fountain of spray. When the scene cleared, the creature was twisting feebly in the water, a great chunk blown out of its side, spilling entrails into the pink-tinted foam. The head carrying the soldier lolled motionless, his body drifting clear of its grasp. The other head weaved drunkenly in the air for a moment, hissing, gurgling, and spitting blood as though in final defiance, before slowly collapsing to float limply beside its twin. The great limbs gave a final kick and were still. With a score of weapons still trained on the creature, men dived into the water to recover their comrade. Carefully, his body was lifted back on board. The cohort surgeon attended to him as best he could, but the man died a few minutes later from his wounds. Ashen-faced, Agricola turned to Ptolemy. "What hell is there that breeds such creatures?" he asked numbly. Ptolemy's face was set and unreadable, betraying nothing of his feelings. "I do not know," he replied evenly, "but we will seek it out if we must, and tame it." "But if there are more things like this?" Agricola's voice was rising in pitch, delayed shock setting in. Ptolemy grasped his arm for a moment to steady him, his eyes fierce. "Not in front of the men," he was saying silently. Agricola swallowed, nodded, held himself in check. For the first time he was conscious of the true strength of will and purpose of his companion. "Don't worry," Ptolemy assured him. "It died. It is only flesh and blood." Ptolemy turned away to order new watches to be kept. Agricola's eyes followed him. "But we are also only flesh and blood," he thought. The next morning, the dead soldier was buried. The little fleet continued on up the river. Gradually, the nature of the land began to change. It was over a year before Ptolemy Caesar returned to Alexandria, and from there to Rome. But he returned a changed man, burdened with the memory of an experience beyond understanding.